The Zone.
Shock the system.
Welcome to the After Hours Lounge on 1620 The Zone, the 1620 The Zone app, and 1620thezone.com. When 6A to 6P isn't enough, the boys have you covered. Here's Jimmy Allen
and John Schreiner.
Welcome into the After Hours Lounge on a Friday night live from Los Angeles, California. I'm Jimmy Allen. That is John Schreiner. Dan Campine's beautiful face is sitting across the screen from us. Joey Colbert and our friend Ben Geezer back in Omaha, Nebraska. We'll take your phone calls tonight, 402-951-1620. You can follow the show at After Hours 1620 to weigh in on anything we are talking about tonight. We are brought to you by Bellevue University. If you're looking for the ideal college experience, head over to bellevue.edu and register for classes tonight. We've got a great show lined up for you. Again, we are in LA, coming to you live from right across from the LA Live building, where they will have the weigh-ins for Terrence Crawford and Israel Madrimov tonight. We did give you a little bit of misinformation. The weigh-ins tonight are going to be at 8 o'clock Central Time. They're at 9 p.m. Eastern Time, so we did get some miscommunication last night. So after we are done here, we're going to head right across to LA Live and go over to the weigh-ins for tomorrow night's big fight. Speaking of tomorrow night's big fight, we've got a great show lined up for you tonight that will feature a lot of the faces you're going to see tomorrow night. Brian McIntyre, the head coach of the Team Crawford camp, will join us here in just a little bit at the top of the hour at 7 o'clock back in Omaha. And then the head trainer for the Madrimov team is supposed to join us as well at 7:30. We're going to talk to Joel Diaz at that time as well. You can catch any of that if you miss it and aren't able to stick around on our radio replay page on 1620thezone.com as well. Before we get there, we got to take it back a little more locally to Lincoln. The Nebraska football team had day 2 of fall camp today, and we heard from all 3 quarterbacks today. Glenn Thomas, and some of the other Donovan Raiola today as well. I want to start off with Dylan Raiola, though. For a kid who, for all intents and purposes, has a lot of eyes on him and has for the better part of 2 years since he was originally named the number 1 player in the country coming out of high school, does not have a social media presence. And I don't think I really even put that together until he said it today on at his time at the podium, because he is talked about so often on social media that I just didn't even reference the fact that he doesn't even have a Twitter or any other, or an Instagram or any other kind of social media. Is it impressive that a young man who in today's day and age seems like would love all this attention is trying his best not to have any of it?
Yeah, but he doesn't strike me as that kind of person who wants that that attention.
Good point.
Like, he's a football guy. He just wants to play the game and try to be the best he can at football. And I think that comes across when he's, when you realize that he doesn't have a social media presence. So, I mean, I think it's pretty much par for the course of what we know about him. I mean, he played his recruitment really close to the vest. There wasn't a lot of information.
All 3 of them?
Yeah. There wasn't a lot of information ever out there about it until he made a commitment. This is not an attention-seeking young man. Just a good football player.
He was asked about the Patrick Mahomes tweets and stuff like that yesterday. And when he talked about it, he almost like had a cringe look on his face. Like, I don't want to be that guy.
Yeah.
Like, and he obviously knows Patrick Mahomes, and he works with Mahomes as quarterback's coach and spends a lot of time around him, but was like, hey, listen, I've had this haircut since I was like 8 and I've got my own little twist on it. But he seemed legitimately bothered. Like, he's like, it was on ESPN and I saw it with my teammates, and he seemed legitimately bothered with that. And the other thing I wanted to talk about is it feels like Nebraska and Matt Rule has put him in a situation. And I know this was probably very intentional by Dylan's parents, Dylan's camp, maybe not the head coaching staff, but it feels like they've put a lot of pillars in place to help hold him up. Yes, his uncle was absolutely the offensive line coach here before he was ever committed to this school. But they've obviously hired his sister now works at the university as well, and they've got a lot of fallbacks put in place and people that can be supportive. And you don't really get that when you leave, whether it be Arizona or Georgia, wherever you want to say he hails from, or Hawaii or whatever. A lot of student athletes have to leave their nest, leave their home, and be by themselves for the first time. They've really put a support system in place for Dylan to have emotional support as well as from the coaching staff as well.
Yeah, and again, he doesn't seem like somebody who necessarily needs all that. but he is being set up
Yeah.
for the maximum amount of success possible. And look, from the outset, Nebraska has known what they have with Dylan Raiola. They know how important it is to absolutely maximize not only his play on the field, but his personality as part of this football team. He's been a tremendous peer recruiter. I mean, the David Sanders stuff, obviously, all the other things that he has done in working with Carter Nelson to get him on board, all those things. Like Danny Kalen was used in that regard as well. Like, this coaching staff knows what they have, and they are going to use it for everything that it is worth.
And obviously, I was close to the situation the most, but just talking with Adrian Martinez, and there's been a lot of comparison between Dylan Raiola and Adrian just because of the level of recruit that they were, but we haven't. It never felt like Adrian was giving a minimum of what we're seeing Dylan be given to be set up to be successful. I mean, you're seeing the attention to detail in recruiting with the number one wide receiver, with the number one left tackle, but also this stuff on the back end. And I don't necessarily know if this is specifically a Dylan Raiola thing because Matt Rule's gone out and hired a team psychiatrist, 2 different nutritionists, and it has a focus on the mental health and the physical health of his athletes. And that's something you don't see at every single university. We haven't seen it in Nebraska in a long, long time.
Yeah, and it's he's a mature guy. Like he has his head on his shoulders the right way, it seems like, and he was ready to deal with all of these things. And again, it goes back to something I said last night. He's lived the NFL lifestyle. He's seen his dad play in the league. He's been around those guys who conduct themselves in that professional manner, who have stayed on NFL rosters for a long time. He knows what it takes from a mental standpoint, what it takes from a training standpoint to be at that elite level.
I want to talk about that for a second because we brought it up last night. It was referenced today in this interview, and any of the articles printed today mentioned it. He paid to have his receivers flown down to Texas to work with his quarterback's coach in Texas, as well as he's been referenced to taking his offensive line out to several different pizza joints throughout the Lincoln area. Can that be construed as a negative in any way? Because I look at it from this point. If you're Matt Stafford, who obviously Dylan's got a very close relationship with and has his whole life, that makes sense to do that because you're making probably north of $25 million just for your signing bonus, let alone for your career. But can we look at the NIL money? And obviously it's dwarfed by the money that's made in the NFL, as it should be. But I wonder how many people will look at that and say, yeah, it's nice that he's buying us steaks, or it's nice that he's flying us down to Texas, but why am I not getting that? And that could be a problem within the locker room.
I mean, it could be, but I also think that like the players themselves understand the lay of the land, right? Like they know how the game is played now. It's been a thing for long enough that you know what's happening. You know where the bread is buttered, and it's on the side of the quarterback who has 5 stars next to his name.
Yeah, and it's one of those things too that I think Matt Rule has sort of created this team in his own image, and it doesn't seem to be one of those that he wants to be ego-based. And I don't think that's an ego-based thing from anyone. That I think the offensive line understands, like, this guy has seen how Matt Stafford operates.
Yeah.
You know that Matt Stafford's taken his O-line out to dinner, so why wouldn't he do the exact same thing with his college guys?
Yeah, and the amount of money that he's getting in comparison to the rest of the team is like the difference is similar to the difference the amount of money that an NFL quarterback is making to the rest of his team. Like it's not out of whack with the general
but in
state
that
of football.
In that situation, everybody is making money though. And this is a situation where some of the guys that are in question probably aren't. So I could see how it could rub somebody the wrong way.
Yeah, it doesn't help that Matt Rule put it on Front Street too.
Yeah.
And in that press conference said, well, it's going to take a couple $1 million to get a quarterback.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden it's, well, hey, this guy Dylan Raiola wants to sign with Nebraska.
But I think that, to your point, the things that he's doing are are things that can help dampen some of those feelings of jealousy
Right.
by taking guys on trips,
It's
by
going to be
paying
one
for
of
them
the
to
one
eat.
or the other, right? It's either going to extinguish it, and a lot of that is going to come from who Dylan is as a person. And he kind of addressed the situation about critiquing guys or getting after guys
Yep.
today, and he said he's not afraid to do it, and he's able to do it because of what they were able to do in the spring and the way they did team building exercises and mat drills through the spring, as well as that obviously I forgot what they call it when they split the three teams into or the team into three separate teams.
Yeah.
And
Husker summer camp.
something, yeah, I can't remember. They had a name for it, but where he was obviously a part of a group of guys, which put him automatically into a leadership role, and that established him, and not only just him, but Daniel Kalin talked about it today. So did Heinrich Harburg, that they're able to kind of rip guys because there's a culture built in Lincoln right now where if you're getting ripped down, you're going to be built back up, and that goes for everybody, and that's an extension of the head coach, in my opinion.
Yeah, I don't know. I think all the things we're seeing is like, again, everybody seems to be rowing in the same direction.
It's
Like,
amazing.
everybody is on board. It's not a leaky ship. You're not getting, reports of malcontents and people who are not happy with their situation. And look, nobody's transferring. Like, that's the other thing you can look at. Nobody's leaving. They don't have
Not,
transfers.
like literally almost nobody.
Just guys are sticking around. And in this era of college football, that's the biggest indication to me of the health of the program, is like, how many guys do you have leaving on a yearly basis?
Yeah, and you can even go back to the comments that were made at media days, not just by Matt Rule, but by the players.
Yeah.
How most of the things that they were referencing in interviews were team chemistry, team bonding, and the way that Matt Rule has kind of formed this team in his own image and has kind of shown them the path to be like, hey, we have to be able to hold each other accountable, but at the same time, like, don't be a jerk about it.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, and it feels like that is just Dylan's natural state. Is he's tries to be as relatable as possible, doesn't want to be treated any differently. And when we first started watching the Chasing 3 documentary series, it kind of felt like they were intentionally like hiding Dylan Raiola.
Yeah.
I don't think that's the case. I don't think he wants to be around the cameras. I
He's
honestly,
hiding himself.
It could be a concentrated effort from both sides.
And again, everything we've seen is like we started the segment with, doesn't have social media.
Yeah.
Like, doesn't want to be out in front of it. So at some point he's going to have to be, because he's going to be the starting quarterback, and he's going to have to stand up there at the podium like he did and talk to the media and be the face of the program. And that's all things that, those are all things that are going to come in time. And a lot of the guys who have social media presences now, who are very active on their social media in this day and age, they do it because it's an NIL opportunity.
Yeah.
Not something that Dylan Raiola really has to worry about
Sure.
at this point.
Because I don't know if you know, it cost $1 billion for a quarterback. Heinrich Harburg talked today too, and one
Didn't grow up in a combine.
Yeah. On top of that, a phrase that he, Daniel Kalin, and Dylan Raiola all said is mastering the offense. And it feels like there's a real effort to make sure that the nuances of this offense are understood at a granular level, even if you're a freshman coming into this system. And Glenn Thomas even talked today about the fact that this offense is multiple, and they can line up in multiple sets and run different plays out of the same formation, and it looks exactly the same in its uniform. I can't remember the last time you could say that about Nebraska's offense, whether it's Frost, Riley, or Pliny.
So
maybe 2011.
Early in Frost's first year, I remember watching that offense and seeing some really cool complementary play designs. There's one that I can specifically remember on the goal line when they ran it was an off ball tight end, came across, blew out the backside linebacker. They tried to run it in behind, didn't get the touchdown. And on the very next play, it was the same motion with the tight end coming across. And instead of hitting that wham block on the edge, he just leaked out into the flat. And there was a little dump off pass for a touchdown. And so there was some of that early on with Frost. I think, Frost was always credited with being the genius play designer.
Yeah.
And you saw some of that. And then the wheels started to come off, and they tried to do things a little differently. But there was some of that early on in Frost. But with that, the offensive balance and designing plays that all look the same,
When we talk about being
That's so vital.
when we talk about being multiple and having the opportunity to run out there in like 11 personnel, or if you're talking double tights or whatever it may be, and then still be able to run the same type of plays, like the last time I can remember feeling comfortable saying Nebraska could do that and do it at a comfortable level is like when Tim Beck was running that like diamond formation with Taylor Martinez, and they could really run any play. Like you would see them run the same play out of that set. You would see them run up in 11 personnel and run a similar play. And it was often it was either in the run game or in the passing game, and you could see them line up anywhere and still kind of execute what they were trying to do. And I honestly feel comfortable saying I don't know if we've seen that since then.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what this offense looks like when they don't have to do certain things.
Yeah.
Right? Because last year the handcuffs were on because you didn't have a quarterback who was as proficient a passer.
Or an identity, really, of any kind.
Well, I mean, they tried to have an option identity. Like that's kind of what they had to do, right? They were forced, their hand was forced by the personnel that they had. Now I think it's going to be different because they're going to have more options. And yeah, I think some of the quarterback run game is going to go away with Raiola because you want to protect him. But I would like to see what the Satterfield offense looks like with the handcuffs off. Because I think a lot of people got on him last year about
Can I ask a
the
legit
way the
question?
offense was run, and I don't think it was entirely fair.
Can I ask a legit question?
Sure.
Because here's the thing. Can we, if this offense looks completely different, and it's going to for a lot of reasons, including the fact that it's going to be Dylan Raiola versus Jeff Sims or Heinrich Harburg, and the lack of ability to throw the ball downfield isn't going to be there anymore. But if it looks this different to the point where we're talking about formations, we're talking about accountability, we're talking about situational play by the quarterbacks and the other players around them, can we look at it and say, okay, this is 100% Marcus Satterfield and the same thing we saw a year ago, and he's responsible for a lot of this? Or do we look at it and go, okay, this is night and day, and this is Glenn Thomas's fingerprints all over this thing?
I think you have to give Satterfield some of the credit. He's still the offensive coordinator, right? And you have to look back at last year and see the deficiencies that they had from a personnel standpoint,
Sure.
and at least give him some of the credit for that. Like I know, like he was one of the most hated guys on the staff last year.
He was one of the most hated guys at South Carolina, too.
Sure.
That's part of the reason I say that.
But I think with the personnel this year, I think you're going to get a good sense of whether or not he's worth his weight as an offensive coordinator.
The ESPN has put out the the 25 teams that have a chance to make the college football playoff this year. We're going to break down our thoughts on that article and a whole lot more when we come back. If you missed the opening segment tonight, check it out at soundcloud.com/afterhour1620 or wherever you find your podcast at. It was brought to you by our friend Amber Best with Berkshire Hathaway Real Estate. She's got a great home that could be your forever home, ready to move off of the market today. It's 2206 Aaron Way out in Fremont Street. It's a beautiful multi-layer home. You can call her and her team at 402-916-0482 or check out Amber Best, that's BESS.com tonight, and buy and sell with the best, Amber Best with Berkshire Hathaway. We'll be right back telling you our thoughts on which team can make the college football playoff this year on 1620 The Zone. You can say Husker football, by the way. Dan texted me last night.
You're listening to After Hours with Jimmy Allen on 1620 The Zone.
.621 on a Friday night here on 1620 Zone, brought to you by Bellevue University. If you want to keep up to date on all things Bellevue athletics, download the BU Bruins app on your smartphone tonight. Jimmy Allen, John Schreiner, Dan Campion live from Los Angeles, California tonight ahead of Crawford v. Madrimov tomorrow night at BMO Stadium. Before we get there, we got to look at the four-letter network. They put out an article listing the top 30 teams that have the best chance of making the college football playoff. John, we talked about this on the flight here.
Yep.
We talked about it since. We both have some discrepancies about this list. Ohio State,
they're not number one.
They're not at the top of this list. And I started to think how ridiculous that was and why they wouldn't be. They have a ton of talent. In my opinion, the best roster top to bottom in the nation. But a lot of those guys are new faces. Specifically, Quinshon Judkins and whoever ends up being their quarterback, whether it be Julian Sand.
It's going to be Will Howard to start, I think.
I do too, because I don't think you make that move with that intention, but I don't think he finishes the season. Is there any part of you that is worried about that offense? Not even that offense, that entire team, because the defense has some pieces that are going to be new faces too, gelling together and it not necessarily working?
Not on the defensive side. I think Ohio State's going to probably be the best defense in the country. I do have concerns about the offense, and they're the same concerns that showed up last season, because I don't think Will Howard is, and I've said it a bunch of times, I don't think he's a significant upgrade over Kyle McCord. He's a better runner.
I don't know if he's an upgrade at all, if I'm being honest.
I don't know that he's a better passer. So, what you're getting with him as a runner, I don't know that it makes up in the passing game. So until I see it, until they get tested, which they won't, seriously early on. So I don't know. I think we're not going to know a lot about Ohio State until later. But man, those are the concerns. Now, I will say they're loaded with talent on the offensive side of the ball. Look, they made up for average quarterback play from Kyle McCord last season, and we're still pretty darn good. If they get average quarterback play from a running quarterback and Will Howard, they're still going to be really good.
Yeah,
so
agreed.
They have the best chance to win the Big Ten. They have, to me, the best chance in the country to make the playoff. FPI says they have only a 67.2% chance to make the playoff at all.
Ohio State?
Yeah, I think that's ridiculously low.
I think it's like 99.9% chance to make the playoff.
If they don't finish first in the Big Ten, they're finishing second.
Yeah, barring some major injury, and I let it off saying that it may not be they may not gel together. Even if that happens, they're still going 10-2, and a 10-2 Big Ten team is getting into the playoff 100% of the time.
Yeah, so Oregon on this list is number 2. It says they have a 76% chance to make the playoff.
Georgia is 1
with a 79.1% chance. So, I mean, I still think Ohio State is the team with the best odds of making the playoff. I don't see it any other way.
So best odds, I think, is a little bit but I think easiest path to the playoff for sure.
They do have to go play at Oregon.
I was thinking about this too, because I saw Georgia at number 1. I was trying to think of a situation in which they wouldn't make the playoff.
Everybody dies.
And I literally, a meteor hits Athens. That's the only
Carson Beck gets injured.
I mean, they've still got the former number 4 player overall in the country backing him up too. So it's not like they're at a lack of talent.
And the SEC East is.
Well, that's not even a thing anymore.
Yeah, but the teams from the East. So
actually, I've got an even better one. Dodge recalls the Hellcat. All the Hellcats have to go back to the manufacturer.
That may actually help the cause.
That might make it more. They might be at 94% if that happens.
Yeah, they'll just pencil them in early September. They don't even got to finish out the rest.
I mean, those traditional SEC East teams are not going to be very strong this year. Vanderbilt, Florida, South Carolina, those teams they're not going to be real good. And for Georgia to not make the playoff, I mean, you look at their schedule.
Something has gone.
Yeah, they open with Clemson, but Tennessee Tech, Kentucky.
They're going to beat Clemson by 30 or more points.
And
by
then
the way.
they have to go to Alabama, but then it's Auburn, Mississippi State. They go to Texas. I mean, just let's say they lose to Alabama and they lose to Texas. They're not losing any other games on that schedule. They finish with Florida, Ole Miss, Tennessee, and UMass.
So, and here's the other thing. So Texas is third on this list with a 67.8% chance to make the college football playoff and 11.4% chance to win the national championship. I have a lot of thoughts on how Texas could maybe not even make the playoff in general because, to your point, they have to play Georgia and they get Georgia at home, but it's the week after the Red River Shootout too.
Yeah.
And we've seen that game just get turned on its ear at any point. And if they lose to Oklahoma and they lose to Georgia and the SEC just catches up to them at some point and they lose 3 games, if we're talking about Texas being 9-3 and maybe not even playing for the SEC championship, they're not in, right?
Well, I think there's going to be a 3-loss team in the playoff,
and it'll probably come from the SEC.
It's probably going to come from the SEC. I think there's going to be a 3-loss team, but I don't think there will be multiple 3-loss teams in the playoff.
No, I don't.
So,
I don't think there will either.
I mean,
and it depends how the Big Ten shakes out too, because we've seen it where you get Ohio State, Penn State, one or two other teams that either has 1 loss or 2 losses, and they're definitely jumping a 3-loss SEC team.
And we were talking about how favorable Georgia's schedule looked. Texas's schedule looks possibly even more so. I mean, they do have to go to Michigan second game of the season, but
they get Georgia in Austin.
Their road games after that are at Vanderbilt, at Arkansas, and at Texas A&M.
Well, if you believe ESPN, Texas A&M is going to be a world beater.
They might not lose a game on the road. I really don't think they will.
Texas A&M is on this list at 21%, a 21% chance for a team that went 7-6 a year ago to make the college football playoff. Now, granted, there are obviously more teams that are going to make it in this year with 12, but I like Mike Elko. I think he's going to be a good fit at Texas A&M. But in the first season, replacing what the dumpster fire that it was in College Station a year ago, and you have 2 new teams in the conference. The FPAI has them as an 8% chance to make the SEC championship game. So if you're telling me a team has an 8% chance to make its own conference title game, but a 21% chance to make the college football playoff, the math isn't mathing there for me. I don't think Texas A&M is going to be that much improved. I think they'll be a little improved. I don't think they're going to take that big of a leap in Mike Elko's first year.
Yeah, I think this is a 3-loss team.
I had 4.
Notre Dame, probably Texas.
Yeah.
I think they lose to Texas. They probably lose to LSU.
I think they lose to Missouri at home.
3 or 4 losses pretty easily for this A&M team with a new coaching staff.
Auburn's going to be dramatically improved, and they have to play Auburn the week before Texas, so that's obviously a trap game.
Yeah, this is a tough schedule for A&M.
I think you could find 5 or 6 losses on that.
Sure.
On
yeah, I don't give them a 21% chance of making the playoff.
Let me ask you this, because we talked about Lane Kiffin last night and the success that he's had at Ole Miss, and he's had a good run at Ole Miss, but they have Ole Miss not on this list. If Ole Miss doesn't make the college football playoff with 12 teams, with Jackson Dart back this year and the ability, they're on this list. They're like 19th or 20th, but so they would technically be out if the top 12 teams got in. Does the seed start to warm up in Oxford if Lane Kiffin misses the first 12-team playoff with the roster that they have coming back this year?
I mean, realistically, you've got to be one of the top 3 teams in your conference in the Big 12 or the SEC to make the playoff, right?
Ole Miss is 18th on this list, sorry, with a 20% chance.
So I think if they're not one of the top 3 teams in the league, and they're like maybe 4th, if they finish 4th or 5th in the SEC, I don't think so. If they're worse than that, then yeah, I do. I think that there's going to be some.
Especially if Mike Elko is able to turn around Texas Tech.
Yeah.
Or Texas A&M.
And they have a quarterback who's got one of the best Heisman odds in Jackson Dart.
But he's had a lot of promise since he's gotten to Oxford.
Yeah, well, they've got a pretty favorable schedule.
It helps.
Just like running down the whole thing. Furman win, Middle Tennessee win, Wake Forest win, Georgia Southern probably a win. Kentucky.
We can't pencil it as a win around here anymore.
Yeah, Kentucky probably a win. South Carolina probably a win. They have to go to LSU. They get Oklahoma at home. They get Georgia at home. and they get Florida, or they have to go to Florida. Those are probably the stretch of games where I would say maybe you're getting 2 losses out of there. So they've got a good chance to make the playoff.
If Ole Miss has 2 losses, I think they're making the playoffs.
2 losses is interesting. So I was thinking about this. Notre Dame has a 16% chance of to go undefeated according to the FPI. That's tied for the second best chances according to the FPI. Best with Oregon. But does a 2-loss non-affiliated team get in? I think it's different if it's Notre Dame. But they have to go to A&M, and it feels like they would have to beat the eventual ACC champion, whoever it ends up being, because obviously they're of their ACC slate. But if they have 2 losses and they don't beat the eventual ACC champion, and that's I think that's a situation where Notre Dame may miss the first college football playoff, despite it kind of being set up for them to do so.
I don't know. I think if you're a 2-loss team in this new format,
got to remember there's 4 automatic qualifiers.
Yeah.
Too.
So you got 8 other spots plus the highest. So there's 5 automatics really.
Yeah,
right.
That's true.
With the highest ranked non-power conference.
Yeah, so that leaves 7 other spots, and we've already talked about the fact that there's a possibility that a 3-loss SEC team would get in. Would you put a 10-2 Notre Dame team in over a 3-loss Tennessee team?
Yes.
Well, let's do the exercise. Let's take last year's AP top 25, right, and how they finished.
See, but I don't know if that's an apples to apples comparison, because we saw an undefeated Florida State team not get into the college football playoff because obviously their matchups and their stylistics matter to this committee. So I don't think we can. And I know a lot of people have gone back and have looked at the previous polls and said, it looks like this, and this is what the 12 teams would have been, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We've seen this committee not follow lockstep several times with what the quote-unquote traditional model would tell you.
I don't disagree. But
I'm just going to say it. I think no matter what, the College Football Playoff Committee, if Notre Dame rolls into the end of the season, just 2 losses, I think they turn a blind eye and they roll them in there because they know that Notre Dame has the right amount of eyeballs on them and the right amount of people that actually care about them to make it worth putting them into at least a college football playoff game.
If you include James Madison, there were 11 teams last year who finished with 2 or fewer losses.
Why would you not include James Madison?
Well, I mean, because they weren't in the AP top 25.
Oh, I got you. Okay.
So because they couldn't be. Throw Liberty in there at 13-1 makes 12 teams that finished with 2 or fewer losses. It seems like if you're a 2-loss team, you're getting in the playoff.
If Jamie Shadwell is able to take Liberty to the college football playoff this year, he's coaching somewhere in a Power 5 next year, right? Can we agree with that?
He's going to be offered. He's going to have the opportunity.
LSU has a 25% chance of making the college football playoff this year. Is that good or bad for Brian Kelly? That number is 25%.
Good or bad for Brian Kelly?
Replacing a Heisman Trophy winner.
Yeah.
Number 2 ranked offense in the country a year ago.
I don't know that it's either good or bad.
Okay.
I don't know that it sets an unrealistic expectation at all in either direction.
Let me tell you why I ask. Because Kansas also has a 25% chance of making the college football playoff.
Yeah, I think
according to this article.
I think the thinking there is it's going to be a little easier for a team like Kansas to make it into the top 2 of the Big 12 than it would be for LSU to make it into the top 3 of the SEC. I think it matters who you play and when you play them.
We were talking about this before the lights went on today, but man, the Big 12 is going to be so much fun.
It's going to be a lot of fun. Yeah, it's going to be a fun league.
I think we're going to look at it like this every year. I think we're going to look at the SEC and the Big 10 as the business model. Like, okay, all right, well, it's cutthroat, and these teams got to win X amount of years, and then we're going to turn on the Big 12 on Saturdays and just go, let's just throw it all over the yard. We'll play coast to coast. This is going to be a ton of fun.
Yeah, I love it. I'm excited for the Big 12 this year. I think, the additions of Utah, Colorado, the Arizona schools, it's going to be wild and woolly, man. You might not know what's going to happen from week to week.
Arizona has a 16% chance of making the playoff, according to this article from ESPN. Outside of Kalen DeBoer at Alabama this year, I don't know if I can look at a team that has a first-year head coach at the top of the helm and is making a conference change and feel confident saying, I know who that team is and what they can do at this level.
Look, Jedfish did a lot of good.
Yeah.
At Arizona. So
by the way, he took about 15 players with him to Washington.
That's my point. is
Despite the fact that you have your number one wide receiver and your number one and your quarterback
Yeah.
back at Arizona.
Noah Fafita's a good quarterback.
Yeah, pretty good.
You've got the quarterback
Fifth
spot
in the
locked
Heisman
down.
ranking right now.
You got your quarterback spot locked down, and that's more than a lot of people can say. So I think that's probably a good number for Arizona. I don't think that they're better than Utah, who was surprisingly low on this list, I felt, because I think they're the prohibitive favorite to win the Big 12 this season. And I think they came in somewhere in the high 20s, if I'm not mistaken. They're 29 with a 12.5% chance. I thought that was very
behind
low.
3 Big 12 schools, by the way.
Very wild.
K-State, Kansas, and
the aforementioned Arizona
were the 3 ahead of them. Yeah, so it's Big 12 is going to be strange. It's going to be a ton of fun. And I said this before we went on air. It's going to
Who's even in the Big 12 now?
Yeah, it's going to remind you a lot of the old Big East, and we talked about West Virginia playing Pitt in conference football. Hey, if you missed the second segment tonight, check it out at soundcloud.com/after-hours1620. It was brought to you by 402 Barbecue. If you're looking to grab lunch tomorrow, you can stop by 84th and Spring. Try mine, John and Dan's personal favorite. It's the Cadillac sandwich. It's brisket. It's pork. It's topped off with their world-famous smoked mac and cheese. Make sure you mention to Kelly and the team you heard about them on After Hours. She's going to throw in a free soda with the purchase and the mention of our show. It's 402 Barbecue. We'll be right back. We may have a special guest, but we could possibly be talking about the players and coaches we think about when we talk about the 4 new Big Ten schools here on 1620 The Zone.
Hey, everybody. John Schreiner here for Jerry Ryan Clothing and Sportswear. You know, fall sports season, we are just about there. You've made it. You made it through the long dog days of summer. We're almost there. We can see the finish line. And if you're looking in your closet and it doesn't look like finish line material, you need to check out Jerry Ryan Clothing and Sportswear at 78th and Dodge. Whether you're heading down to watch Nebraska play, whether you're going to be sticking around Omaha, watch that team in black or the team in blue, doesn't matter. They're going to have you covered with the gear you need to look your best on game day. They got all the great polos, the quarter zips, gray, red, black, blue, white, whatever color you like. Don't listen to Jimmy. You don't have to wear red every day. Get it in Miz and Maine. Get it in Johnny O. Get it in Peter Millar. Get it in Cutter and Buck. Whatever your favorite brand is, they got you covered. You're going to love the clothes at Jerry Ryan. And if you need to update your suit game, they're going to give you the best fitting experience in the Midwest. You're going to look great for your big day. Check them out, 78th and Dodge, centrally located, easy to find. Tell them After Hours sent you, and they've been dressing Omaha for over 50 years.
6:42 on a Friday night here on 1620 The Zone, brought to you by Bellevue University. Head over to bellevue.edu, register for classes, and become a Bruin tonight. There are 4 new faces in the Big Ten. I don't know if you've heard about this. One of them has recently showed up to Matt Rule's press conference in a duck outfit. But when we talk about Washington, Oregon, USC, and UCLA, we're going to do a practice here where we'll name the school. And then I want your first name. It could be coach, could be player, could be personality, could be whoever that comes to mind when we say the school name. Dan, do you want to participate in said event?
Heck yeah, I do.
Yeah, you do.
Absolutely.
I get to speak tonight. I have a microphone now.
Where do we want to start? Should we start with the Washington Huskies?
Sure, start with Washington Huskies.
Yeah. Okay, Dan, we'll start with you. When I say Washington University, what's the first name that comes to mind?
Mina Kimes.
I'm here for it.
I literally wouldn't. I've been thinking about this all day, on and off, because spoiler alert, this is how radio is done, folks. Something gets mentioned over breakfast, and then we say, "All right, we'll think on that."
And
the only Washington Husky
for all of this, by the way,
I could think of was Mina Kimes, because she famously went to school there, and she
is it famous? Okay.
made a big she made a big deal about the fact that they were in the college football playoff last year.
I went with a current media member also, but also somebody that we saw at Nebraska when Nebraska took on Washington. For me, it's Brock Huard. He references it all the time when he's on calls about playing at Washington, his time at Washington. Anytime he's on a Nebraska game, he references getting rocked by the black shirts. So for me, it's Brock Huard.
So I'm a little older than you guys. So
Famously.
The name that first came to mind when I was thinking about this was Steve Emtman.
Oh, okay.
Who was the All-American defensive lineman for Washington in the early 90s when they came to Nebraska, when they won the national title.
Yep.
They beat Nebraska in Lincoln. It was a rare event then for a team to come into Lincoln and win.
Didn't happen a lot back then, kids.
And he was just an absolute stud, and that's the name that first came to mind.
Is it surprising to either one of you when we were talking about this earlier that the first name that came to mind for me was Michael Penix? I mean, I think he probably gets
he changed the game.
Gets roped into Indiana a lot, and I think that might be the first name that if we talked about Indiana football as well too. But I think what they did last year probably isn't in the history books isn't going to get the recognition it deserves for a couple reasons. Obviously, they didn't win the national championship, but B, they did it with a coach that ended up leaving, and they did it with a quarterback that they got through the transfer portal.
Yeah, you would be forgiven for saying Michael Penix. That's not a bad answer.
What about Oregon, Dan? When I say Oregon to you, what's the first name that comes to mind?
Well, see, I'm younger than both of you are.
Infamously.
So the first name that comes to mind is actually, for me, their head basketball coach and one of their assistants is Dana Altman and Kevin McKenna.
Yeah.
Because I grew up going to Kevin McKenna basketball camp, and obviously when you move to Omaha, there are like 2 choices, and people are like, well, you need to like Husker football, but you also need to get really into this thing called Creighton University basketball.
Yeah.
Trust me, you're going to love it, and our head coach, Dana Altman, is an electric factory.
Oh, by the way, he's from the state.
Yes. So Dana Altman is my true Oregon pick.
For me, it's LeGarrette Blount. And
the punch heard around the world.
Yeah, for that reason. Obviously, the punch that he threw at Boise State when they went to the blue turf and lost. Then former Nebraska head football coach Scott Frost had to drag LeGarrette Blount away from just starting to throw right hooks at fans in the crowd. And it was just such a moment that stuck with the sporting world for so long, and me specifically, that that's the first person that comes to mind. Outside of the duck doing push-ups.
For me, it's Joey Harrington.
That'd be number 2, by the way, for me.
Just because he was the quarterback when Oregon started fitting into the national conscience of football, or the national consciousness of football.
Famously said they would have beaten Miami if they would have had the chance.
And just those old Oregon uniforms, and Joey Harrington run the offense out there on the West Coast.
He was Oregon before Oregon was cool.
Yeah, and I had a friend who was a big fan of Joey Harrington, and was convinced that he was going to be the second coming in the NFL. And obviously that didn't happen. But it's when you say Oregon football, the thing that I recognize was like the start of the modern Oregon program. And Joey Harrington was a big part of that.
Since they're new to the Big Ten, I think it's time to start throwing shade. They've won as many national championships since Joey Harrington left as Nebraska has.
Yep.
So Dan Campion.
But they played in more.
Also, if I can slightly revise my answer too, when I think of Oregon, I obviously think of Bill Bowerman. I didn't want to leave that out there because the folks at home know that I like my shoes, and
Oh,
Bill
yeah.
Bowerman is one of the reasons that I like my shoes.
I would have bet money you were going to say Phil Knight when we were doing this exercise earlier. How about USC?
To be fair,
How about USC? We're just a few miles away from the Trojans campus. When I say the University of Southern California, what's the first name that comes to mind for you, Dan?
all right. So the joke answer is Dr. Dre, because I watched that documentary and how much money he donated to the music school. But
Nice.
athletics wise, top tie, it's obviously Matt Leinart and Reggie Bush for me.
Mm.
Those years were, 04, 03, 04, 05, all those formative years when you're like a child and you start watching
Sure.
football and actually like recognizing people and being like, oh, this is actually a big deal. These guys could win that weird trophy where the guy's pointing out at something, it looks like.
For me, it's Keith Jackson. Hearing him talk about Pasadena and the Rose Bowl, and every time USC
The sun set over the
was able
San
to play,
Gabriel.
but obviously he called a ton of those games where Reggie Bush and Matt Leinart were the focal point too. But if we're talking about just the school, I mean, for me, it's Reggie Bush.
Yeah, it's the same for me. Reggie Bush. I mean, that guy was the human highlight reel, right? It was a close second with O.J. Simpson for me. Just having grown up in the era when OJ was a big star, you just knew he represented the glory days of USC football.
Speaking of that trophy,
Say it ain't so, OJ.
Pointing at somebody. Last one, UCLA. Dan?
Yes. So UCLA, if I could put it all into like one word, it would be basketball.
Yeah.
Because I
thought you were going to say John Wooden.
I was about to say John Wooden, and then obviously during those formative years, Russell Westbrook, Kevin Love. It was like the electric factory that is USC or UCLA basketball, is just always kind of on top for me.
It's two people for me. It's Maurice Jones-Drew, just because I loved him when he was Jacksonville, and I was a big fan of what he was able to do there. But the other one's Jonathan Ogden, because for so long that was the comparison. If you were a left tackle coming out of college, it was, could you be Jonathan Ogden? What he meant to the Ravens and obviously to UCLA football. For me, those are the first two things two guys that pop into mind to me.
Yeah, and for me, it's Troy Aikman. Learning about, like, came into my own football fandom in the early 90s when the Cowboys were in their run, and it was Aikman and Emmitt Smith and Michael Irvin, and just like studying all the backgrounds of those guys and learning that Troy Aikman had started his career in Oklahoma and transferred to UCLA because he couldn't run the option, and so when I think about UCLA football, it's definitely Troy Aikman.
Yeah, honestly, like my knee-jerk reaction was Chip Kelly, just because of it's been recency bias for me.
Sure.
But yeah, to me, it's definitely Jonathan Ogden, top of the list.
Quick little fun side note, because I am planning a wedding and we've been sending out random invitations and stamps and whatnot. When I went and I had to pick up stamps, I was like, well, they have a lot of great stamps here. They have ones that have John Wooden on them. These are going to very specific people that I really, really enjoy.
If you missed our thoughts on the four new faces in the Big Ten, who our knee-jerk reaction to the school is and the thought processes around them, check them out at soundcloud.com/afterhours1620. It was brought to you by our friends at Cunningham's Pub. If you're looking for somewhere, if you're not in the LA area like we are tonight, and you're looking for somewhere to catch Crawford versus Madrimov, you can stop by one of Cunningham's two great locations, whether it be the Old Mill District or the Blackstone area. You can stop by either location. Grab dinner and drinks tonight. Stop by tomorrow. Catch the fight as well. We'll be right back, hopefully talking to Brian McIntyre, the head coach of the Crawford camp, or talking about the social media soundbite. There's a new map we're going to tell you about when we come back on 1620 The Zone.
Hey, everybody. It is Dan Campanen here to tell you about Pepper Jack's Grill. Now, I'm about 900 miles away from the nearest Pepper Jack's Grill right now, but you know what? If you are in our NRG Media 1620 The Zone listening area, you've got 10 great locations that you can go to right now to get your steak Gunner Philly with all the vegetables, including that delicious jalapeno juice to make it extra spicy. And of course, I'm going to tell you again, please don't skip on their fries. They are absolutely bonkers good with that ranch that they've got. So be like us, or be better than us, and go to Pepper Jack's tonight.
6:55 on a Friday night, live from Los Angeles, California. This is the After Hours Lounge, brought to you by Bellevue University. If you're looking for the ideal college experience, head over to bellevue.edu and register for classes tonight. John Schreiner, Jimmy Allen, Dan Campen in LA, our friend Joey Colbert back in studio. Joey, good evening, buddy. How are you?
Not too bad. How are you guys doing?
What's the weather like in Omaha right now?
It's hot.
Is it? Okay.
Still
great.
hot.
Just found out the air conditioner stopped working at my house with my wife and my 3 children in it.
Ooh,
So I'm
that's not good.
very excited to hear that.
Not good.
There has been some news in regards to the Big Ten. We just got done talking about the 4 new faces. The faces appear in the Big Ten commercial. Joey, give us the soundbite tonight.
Yes, I will have it right here.
It is back in its entirety. People were wondering if the map commercial that represents the Big Ten would be back, and it starts out on the West Coast and shows the 4 new schools. First, it starts in the upper northwest with Washington, Oregon, swoops down to where we are in LA. I don't know if you know this. UCLA is in LA.
We're in LA.
But then it shows Nebraska, Iowa, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Northwestern, Illinois, and then pans out to Purdue, Indiana, and then the Michigan schools before heading to Ohio State, and then the East Coast, where it goes to Happy Valley, Maryland, and then Rutgers.
The birthplace of college football.
People forget, and I wonder if this is why. I don't know if you've seen this video today, John, but there's been a video posted by the Big Ten that shows each stadium, and it starts at Rutgers, and it gives a night vision of both Rutgers, Maryland, and then also Happy Valley. And they show fireworks and these cool sceneries of the 3 schools, and then it shows all the rest of the schools, and it's only like a daytime practice shot of the school. And I kind of wonder if they're like, hey, we have this great idea for this awesome video, and they went, this is a lot of schools. Let's just show the campus. Because
we have 18 now.
Honestly, from the video, the way it starts, like it makes it look like Rutgers is just like this cathedral to college football.
But yeah, hearing that music for that commercial, just like, it sets something off in you, doesn't it? It just means football season, right? When you hear that music and you see the
29 days away
digital representations of all the schools on the
Yeah,
map.
you kind of get sick of this commercial by about mid-November, but it's when it's August and you're craving football, it just hits completely differently.
I love that they're keeping it around and adding the new schools to it. I think it's great.
I like when things don't change too. Like if it works, like I'm being serious.
So you hate college football?
Yeah, to some degree.
Take notes, SEC.
Yeah, right. But honestly, like I kind of have an appreciation for the SEC that they haven't sprinted to the change, and they haven't really done anything to. I mean, obviously they brought Texas and Oklahoma in, but that made sense, right? They haven't done the Rutgers Maryland thing where it's like, okay, that's a little head scratching. I'm not sure why that was done, but Texas and Oklahoma to the SEC makes sense.
They don't seem to be as concerned about TV markets as the Big Ten does. They're more about geographics. Like, does it make sense within our geography? I don't think you're going to see SEC take a run at Notre Dame. You know what I mean? Like, SEC taking a run at Notre Dame seems like it's just like not their MO. They would not be into like grabbing a USC or a UCLA or something like that. Like, that is not what they're after. The Big Ten is much more about making money for its member schools by adding TV markets and upping their media rights deal. Which, look, for everybody involved in the Big Ten, that's great for them. Like,
for sure,
to have an organization that has their financial interests at heart. Awesome. The SEC has, I think, some other ideals. They want quality programs. They want geographically sensible programs. Like, they just have a different set of values for their conference. And it's not to say that either one is wrong. It's just, what do you want from your conference alignment?
Yeah, and the SEC seems listen, and they've been the flag bearer for the entire platform.
They're not doing too bad monetarily either.
Yeah, but they've been. I mean, outside of Michigan winning this national championship, they've kind of been, the standard bearer for college football. So they can dig their heels and say, no, you change. You guys can be
Yeah.
different. What we're doing is not only are we making money off it, but it's working and we're winning national championships to go along with it. If you missed the social media soundbite tonight, check it out at soundcloud.com/afterhours1620 or wherever you may find your podcast at. It was brought to you by our friends at Pixel Fire Marketing. If you're a business owner, Google your company right now. Do you like what you see when it comes up? Does your business even have a Google business profile? Or is your phone not ringing right now and you can't find out why? You need to work with our friends Dan and Courtney at Pixel Fire Marketing. They can build your Google business profile up to make sure it's targeting your ideal client and engaging your brand online today. Check out pixelfiremarketing.com for more details. We're still waiting for confirmation that Brian McIntyre is going to be here. We may be talking to the head trainer for Terrence Crawford when we come back on the other side of the break. If not, we'll give you more information on what's going on in the sporting world right here on 1620 The Zone. Hey everybody, it's Jimmy Allen here for AX Plumbing. If you own a home or if you own a business and you keep having plumbing issues, or maybe you have a new plumbing issue that you weren't expecting that came up, head over to axbservice.com tonight. Work with Nick and the crew. They're going to leave your home or your business cleaner than they found it. They even offer a discount for military members, either if you're a current member or if you've served in our nation's military before. There is a discount for you. Head over to axpservice.com tonight and book an estimate with Nick and the crew. 7:06 on Friday night here on 1620 The Zone, coming to you live from Los Angeles, California. I'm Jimmy Allen. That's John Schreiner. We are eagerly awaiting the appearance of Ryan Bomack McIntyre here on the After Hours show, brought to you by Pyramid Contractors. If you've been affected by the seasonal storms, or you're having thoughts about if your roof needs to be replaced, you can head over to pyramidroof.com tonight and book a free estimate with Joe and the team today. We're coming to you live from California ahead of Crawford versus Madrimov tomorrow night. The weigh-ins set to be here at the top of the hour, 8 o'clock Central Time in Nebraska, 9 o'clock, or excuse me, 6 o'clock Pacific Time for anybody that's listening to us in LA. There has been the who's who of the boxing world here in LA since we've been here, and we've gotten the ability to kind of rub elbows with a few people and just have some conversations, but not necessarily the big fight feel it had for Spence a year ago, because listen, that fight was 7 years in the making.
Yep.
But it seems like all eyes in the boxing world are going to be on BMO Stadium tomorrow night.
It certainly does. And one of the coolest things, I put this out on Twitter last night, was we were just standing outside the lobby here at the JW Marriott, which is right next to crypto.com and LA Live in downtown Los Angeles. And who walks through just casually but Riddick Bowe?
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, this is big time now.
Yeah, we're at the right spot.
Big Daddy Bowe walking into, and you wouldn't even have known it. Like, he had a small little group of people with him, and people were coming up to him and asking for pictures, but it was just like,
and he said yes to everybody, by the way.
Yeah, and it's like you're standing there looking at that guy and like,
one of the greatest to ever do
that's like one of the huge boxing stars from my childhood, and here he is, 20 feet from me.
Yeah,
and like here it's this sort of surreal experience to be in among it.
Yeah, and I told this story last year, but I mean, we were literally sitting at the MGM Grand having brunch, I guess, and it wasn't like there was a rope off or anything. It was just the normal seating area for everybody. We're sitting there having brunch, and Evander Holyfield and Roy Jones Jr. just came inside the table next to us. It was like, oh, everybody is going to be here. And Mike Tyson flipped a coin for Spence Crawford last year, and there won't be a coin toss for tomorrow, but they often have famous boxers come back, or if they want to be a part of it, they're up on stage for the weigh-ins. And I wonder if that's why he's here, if he's going to be a part of the festivities tonight and tomorrow, because they didn't announce anybody for last year's event, and it just kind of happened that everybody just kind of showed up at when we talk about the LA scene, and you mentioned it, we're right next to crypto with Lakers play, and obviously LA Live is one of the biggest events and outdoor venues in the country, and that's where the weigh-ins will take place, and the last press conference ahead of tomorrow's big fight will take place tonight, and it's right across from where we're at. But it was really interesting to see who came out last year. I mean, we were sitting 3 feet away from Travis Scott. We got to see Mark Davis in his awful haircut, and Terrell Owens was there. So I mean, there was just so many people that you wouldn't necessarily expect to see sitting next to you that we were able to meet.
It might be even more star-studded with this thing in Los Angeles this time around. There might even be more.
From a national celebrity standpoint, I agree. I think that's the case. But I think from a boxing standpoint, there doesn't seem to be that kind of draw. If Desmond Howard is here, who is friends with Team Crawford, do we boo him? We boo him, right?
I don't know. But and it's just like this being sort of the West Coast epicenter of media, right? Yeah. And like we ate last night in a restaurant that is downstairs from the ESPN Los Angeles headquarters.
We didn't see anybody famous though.
We didn't see anybody
other than us,
obviously. But it's just it's you just get a sense of like this is a much bigger pond. Like we are swimming in a much bigger pond out here.
And as John alluded to, we're coming to you live from the JW Marriott across from LA Live. Tomorrow we will be live at noon on 1620 The Zone, following all of the events in the morning leading up to Crawford versus Madrimov.
Noon our time.
Noon our time here, so it'll be 2 o'clock in Omaha. I'm sorry. Is it? It's 10 our time. It'll be noon in Omaha.
Okay.
Yes. So we will be live from BMO Stadium, and we will giving you all the updates from tonight's weigh-ins, as well as everything heading up leading into the fight tomorrow as well. And not only that, we're going to be live at the stadium too. We'll have some videos and stuff, so make sure you follow us at After Hours 1620 on Twitter. I'm assuming we're probably not going to get Brian McIntyre. We're having some issues getting hold of him and the team. I mean, obviously, he's a little busy right now preparing his guy, Terrence Crawford, for the fight tomorrow night. But the reason I was excited to talk to Bomac was, I mean, it's so rare. And we were talking about the Spence stuff off air, and obviously he moved on from his head trainer. But it's so rare when you see a guy have the level of success that Bud Crawford has had and stick with the guy that he's been with from the beginning. And there just seems to be such a great relationship.
Loyalty.
Not even that, but they've built B&B boxing together, and Bud has helped Bomac kind of get in with some other guys, and Bomac has obviously helped Terrence achieve the level of success he's had. And for anybody that knows Terrence Crawford, even if you don't, I mean, he's talked openly about it. He doesn't let a ton of people in, but to your point about loyalty, my cousin Wayne is the head of his security, and it goes with him everywhere, and he'll be walking him to the ring tomorrow night. And him and Wayne have known each other since they were 8 years old. So it's a group of guys like Wayne Sullivan, like Steven So Cold Nelson, like Brian McIntyre. There's just this unwavering bond that if you're in, he takes care of his people, and his people take care of him, and it's really cool. Obviously, the success helps. The success helps a ton, but that often changes people. And I think if you don't know anything about Terrence Crawford, everything I just said gives you a really good indication into who he is.
Yeah, and things like that in a big money sport where there's always something bigger, better, flashier out there. It is kind of rare to see, and to see him show that those hometown values and sticking with the people that got him there. It's really a great story, and it's something that doesn't go unnoticed, especially like for people like us in the media who have to report on these things.
Yeah.
And you see so often self promotion becomes the only motivation, right? Of
Sure.
getting
We talked about this with Dylan Riley.
the next big
Terrence
thing.
Crawford is definitely that guy too.
Yeah. And so, as you say, that the guys who've been around him, the guys who are close to him, they stay close to him, and that is obviously something that means a lot to him.
Real quick at it, Joey Colbert, thank you for your crack reporting and being on top of things. It is 2 o'clock Central Time back in Omaha. It will be noon here in LA when we are on tomorrow. But yeah, it's been incredible to watch, and when you have an insight to the ongoings and what all they have to go through, and we got to give a thank you to Julie Goldsticker for making sure that we were able to get out here like she did a year ago in LA, in Vegas as well. That she has also been with him since 2014 as well. So it's not even just the people within his inner circle; it's the people that take care of the stuff on the back end as well. We're gonna see what guests we can line up for the rest of the show. Who all we were anticipating several people being here. It sounds like we may not be getting anybody now. We're gonna try to get to the bottom of this. Take a little bit of a break here. If you missed our thoughts on Terrence Crawford, just who he is as an individual, check it out at SoundCloud.com/After Hours 1620 or wherever you may get your podcast from. Is brought to you by Forsman's Finest Decks. If you are trying to keep up with the Joneses, blow the Joneses out of the water by adding that something that your house has been missing. Head over to forsmansfinest.com tonight and have your dream deck built this summer by Travis and crew. Forsmansfinest.com, building the finest decks in Omaha. We got more coverage of Crawford Madrimov when we come back here on 1620 The Zone.
Hey everybody, John Schreiner here for Williams Law. It's the summertime. Things can get a little sideways in the summer. And if things have gotten a little sideways with you or someone you know and their legal situation, you need to get a hold of Bob at Williams Law. Bob has tremendous experience in defending people no matter what their charges are. Maybe it's a DUI, maybe somebody's been hanging out with the wrong crowd, got caught up in a little bit of a bad situation. Whatever it is, Bob's going to give you a free, no obligation consultation, walk you through the steps, give you your rights, and answer all the questions that you may have. Give him a call at 402-522-6317. Get your questions answered by a legal professional with your best interest at heart. Check out WilliamsLawLLC.com tonight. You can get a free, no obligation legal consultation from Bob at Williams Law.
7:19 on a Friday night here on 1620 The Zone, brought to you by Pyramid Contractors. You can head over to pyramidroof.com, book a free estimate if you've been affected by the seasonal storms, or you want to have your questions answered. Hey, did my roof get damaged? Do I need new shingles? What shingles do I need? Joe and the team can help you out with that. And again, Jimmy Allen, John Schreiner, Dan Campbell coming to you live from Los Angeles, California, head of Crawford Madrimov tomorrow night. There is a lot of intrigue surrounding what happens after this fight. And I will say this about last year. When we had Derek James on the show the night before the fight, he looked notably concerned about his guy and was very, not apologetic, but gave Brian McIntyre his flowers, and after he called him fat and obviously was very insulting about it, but was very complimentary about what he's been able to do not only with Bud Crawford but with his entire camp. Joel Diaz made a comment, who was the head trainer for Madrimov, about 15 minutes ago, saying that the Crawford camp should be worried about their guy getting hurt. And now Derek James did not make any sort of comment anywhere near that. And obviously, a year ago, it was very much Errol Spence who got hurt and banged up, and the worst we've ever seen him in his career, obviously. Israel Madrimov comes into this fight undefeated and has not been in a situation where he's been in a whole lot of danger in his career. Now, he's fought in significantly fewer fights than Bud Crawford or Errol Spence coming into this, but there has not been that moment of what seems to be panic. Now, Israel Madrimov has not necessarily gone up with anybody of the boxing IQ or the pedigree that we've seen from Terrence Crawford.
Because nobody has that.
Correct. And there's a reason he's pound for pound number one in the world. But Bud is going to be 37 next month. And there has been all this talk about what happens for Terrence Crawford afterwards. Bud has talked in the last couple of weeks that he only wants to fight 2 or 3 more times. And there's obviously the big fight out there with Canelo Alvarez, and we talked about it last night. But I just don't know. It would be obviously we're rooting for Terrence Crawford to win this fight, but it would be interesting to see what his thought process, what Brian McIntyre's thought process would be around if this doesn't go the way they thought it would or hoped it would. And if it does end up with the first loss on Terrence Crawford's record. Now, us and the folks that make the fine lines in Vegas do not think that is going to happen or be the case. But you are fighting the biggest weight that you've ever fought at in your life, you're Terrence Crawford, and you're facing a very dangerous guy. And listen, Israel Madrimov, we've seen him. He looks probably in the best shape I've ever seen him in his life. And this is an absolutely stacked card. To your point, it isn't a big event. Bud hasn't fought in an outdoor arena like he will tomorrow in almost 9 years. It's going to be interesting to see how the elements play into effect, but also what a younger, bigger fighter looks like against Bud Crawford. Because, yes, Errol Spence was younger, but he's only 2 years younger. We're talking about a more significant age gap here. Obviously, the experience favors Terrence Crawford in a big way, but also he is going to be 37 years old.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see just what the size difference looks like on fight day, right? How much bigger does Matt Madrimov look when they step into the ring? Because like right now they've been cutting weight. They're gonna look smaller than you rehydrate.
Yeah.
You get fueled up. What does Madrimov look like when they step into the ring? What is the size difference actually?
And I'll be interested to hear what Bud has to say after the fight, win or lose, about his training, and to your point, his weight cutting after this, because he is moving up in weight class. He's fighting closer to his normal walk around weight anyway, and he's been wearing a lot of baggy, long clothes too. And I wonder if that's in anticipation for about 45 minutes from now, where we see him step on a scale, probably without a shirt on for the first time, because there was a legitimate gasp in the air a year ago, because all the discussion from the Errol Spence camp was, we don't want to fight Crawford because he's smaller and there's nothing to gain, because if we beat the little guy, it's just us beating the little guy, and if we lose, we have everything to lose. And then when Bud Crawford stood face to face with Errol Spence, he was noticeably bigger muscle-wise and taller than Errol Spence was. And again, Errol Spence was dealing with a lot of ailments over the previous 2 years before that. That has been well documented, but Bud Crawford was clearly the bigger, stronger man.
Yeah, and the other thing is, like, to your point earlier, you look up and down Madrimov's list of fighters. He's 10-0-1.
Yeah.
There's not a recognizable name on there anywhere.
And the one was a low blow, by the way. So it's one of those things that got thrown out for that reason.
Yeah, it was a technical draw after the third round
Yeah.
in a rematch against Michel Soro. So there's a lot of pressure, I think, on Madrimov because this is his first big fight. This is his first time really in front of the national boxing media, the worldwide boxing media.
Yeah.
It's his first chance to show what he is capable of. So the pressure resides all on, even though he's the title holder, right?
Yeah.
Like you don't say this very often. Like the pressure to perform.
But he's the title holder at the weight class they're fighting.
but
If we're talking
still,
about just straps in the closet, it's definitely Bud Crawford by a mile.
Sure, but at this weight class, he's the guy with the belt.
With the proven record, yeah, at this weight class.
And you don't often say that the guy with the belt has the pressure to perform on him.
Yeah,
but that
by
is
the way,
definitely the case in this one.
We talk about 10 years or almost 10 years since Bud fought in an outdoor stadium. Madrimov has not fought in one in his entire career.
Yeah. And he's a guy who's fought all over the world. He's fought in his home at Uzbekistan. He's fought in Saudi Arabia. He's fought in Texas. He's fought in New York. First time he's fought in Los Angeles. But the point here is that we know the experience is definitely on Bud's side. We know that the boxing IQ is definitely on Bud's side. We think that Madrimov will have a size advantage, but I still think like the pressure.
He looks great. He does.
The pressure is going to be all on that side of the ring.
We hear fighters talk all the time about either ring presence or cage presence if we're talking about MMA. But that walk to the ring for the first time at a fight of this event, Bud talked about it last year. He said, it felt different. And probably a lot of that's because Marshall Mathers was standing next to him. And obviously Eminem is going to perform tomorrow night as well. But it's something that I don't think a lot of fighters think when you're going through camp and you're running stairs and you're cutting 20 pounds and you're worried about hydration and what you're eating. What's it going to feel like when, by the way, tomorrow night is sold out. You can't get a ticket to the fight right now. When I walk out in front of 80,000 people, and for the first time in my career. And oh, by the way, my name's on the marquee. That usually doesn't catch up to you either until tonight or tomorrow when you see it for the first time.
And let's not make it like Madrimov is like some giant for the weight. He's 5'8".
Yeah.
He's not. He doesn't have a huge reach. He's not going to have a huge reach advantage.
He's not going to have reach advantage at all. Crawford has the length.
So it's just like the thickness, the musculature.
Yeah,
like,
and he looks cut, by the way.
Yeah.
The best shape I think I've ever seen him in.
So that's going to be the thing I'm looking for is how do they act like from a body composition standpoint? How do they look? And what the other thing that I think is a key to this one, and I know we've talked about this already, it's never been Bud's game. What is the speed differential?
Yeah.
Bud coming up from a smaller weight class, will there be a significant advantage?
Is it a part of the game plan? Is that something that they haven't been able to expose that they want to? And obviously, even if we got to talk to Brian McIntyre tonight, he's not going to tell us that.
No.
But it's going to be interesting to see how him and Coach Red decide to approach that side of things and how. If you know what, let's take a quick break here. I want to talk about when we come back. We're going to talk about what Bud Crawford needs to do tomorrow night. So Cold Nelson told us last night. Everybody's a fight expert when it comes to.
Yeah.
We're going to be that.
We're going to be the fight experts.
We're going to
now.
be that on the. We're going to tell you exactly how Terrence Crawford is going to win this fight tomorrow night. When we come back on the other side of the break. If you missed that segment, check it out at SoundCloud.com/AfterHours1620 or wherever you may find your podcast at. It was brought to you by AX Plumbing. If you have a drain that's just drying, going down slower, maybe you own a business and you need some plumbing work done because you keep having repeat problems, head over to axpservice.com tonight and work with Nick and his team. They're going to help you diagnose the issue, fix the problem long term. You know what? They're going to leave your house or business cleaner than they found it when they showed up. Check out axpservice.com for more details tonight. We'll be right back, giving you the breakdown of how Terrence Crawford wins tomorrow night here on 1620 The Zone. 7:32 on a Friday night ahead of Crawford v. Madrimov here on 1620 The Zone live from LA. We are brought to you by our friends at Pyramid Contractors. If you've been affected by the seasonal storms, you have questions about your roof. Is my siding dinged up? How do I work with insurance to make sure this gets paid for? Get your questions answered at pyramidroof.com tonight. We told you before we went to break that we're going to talk about exactly how Bud Crawford wins this fight tomorrow. And Joey, just a heads up, I accidentally just left the stream, so add me back in here in 2 seconds. For me, I expect the game plan tomorrow to look eerily reminiscent of 3 or 4 years ago. And we talked about this last night. Terrence Crawford, in several of his fights, has been a guy that backpedals for the first 2 rounds strategically to figure out the game plan of the other boxer and then attacks. And it's not because of fear of power or speed or whatever. It's to diagnose what the other guy is doing, dissect it, and move forward from a strategic standpoint instead of just standing there and trying to outfight the other guy.
Yeah, I think that Bud is such a defensively responsible fighter. He doesn't get tagged often, right? And so for the people who are concerned about, the size from Madrimov and how will Bud handle the power and moving up a weight class, I don't know that that's as big a concern because you don't see Bud get tagged a whole lot.
Yeah, he's one of. I mean, there's a real. Do yourself a favor. If you have a stopwatch at home, get it out tomorrow night, and just every time you see Bud's glove touch his ear in a defensive stance,
Yeah.
hold the stopwatch and count the seconds because you're going to be amazed with how long he's able to hold that pose without having to respond offensively, but still look like he's in control of the fight. And again, that's that boxing IQ, what we talked about, and his ability to understand where he's at in the ring, control the situation. And if you don't understand the boxing game, it's hard to understand how important that is. But the fact that he's able to dictate where he stands in the ring as often as he is without throwing a punch is incredible. And he's able to cut off the ring when he knows when he smells blood in the water and he can attack, but he can also be on the defensive side of the ring and be able to back himself into a corner, get himself out of a situation without ever being really damaged, to your point.
The thing that we don't know is how defensively responsible is Madrimov.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I haven't seen enough of him to really know.
And he's to his record that we were talking about earlier, he hasn't had to be that really accountable for that portion.
So how will he handle Bud's counterpunching? That's a big question. The other thing is this happens to a lot of guys who fight Bud, is that they can't catch him, they can't tag him, they can't hit him with a hard shot, and the frustration starts to build up. They start to get out of form. It
happened really quick with Spence a year ago.
They start to get out of form. They start to leave openings, and that's when Bud pounces.
And we're talking about a guy that's had 11 professional fights at this level.
So that's what I'll be. Can Bud frustrate him early to create those openings for the counterpunching when he starts to pour it on in the later rounds? Those are the big keys to the fight for me.
Somebody had posted a video of Errol Spence 3 years ago hitting doing some heavy bag work and working with his trainer in the ring, and had like a side-by-side comparison of the punches he was throwing against Crawford and the punches he was throwing previous to his car accident, and the tag said Crawford wouldn't have been able to handle this level of power from Errol Spence 3 years ago, in which Bud tweeted it and said, "You act like I would have just stood there and took it." Like, that's the thing. Like, yeah, you can hit as hard, like you can hit as hard as Francis Ngannou. You got to be able to catch the guy.
You got to connect.
You got to be able to actually land the punch. And what he does better than anybody, he being Terrence Crawford, is be able to take as limited amount of damage as possible while setting himself up in a situation to deliver the hardest punch he can. Like, the people that were in attendance last year in Las Vegas, and I hate to keep referencing that because this is not the same fight, this is not the same fighter, this is not the same event, this is not even the same stylistic of matchup, it's not even the same weight class. But the thing that everybody took away was how amazed they were by the power of Terrence Crawford's jab. And I think a lot of people discredit the ability that he can fight southpaw and he can fight orthodox. And that is, to your point about frustration, that's where a lot of that comes in at. Because once you think you have him figured out for the first 2 rounds, he comes out in the southpaw stance, he switches up and he ends up leading with his power hand with his right hand. But in those 2 rounds leading up to that, he could stand southpaw and jab you in the face with his power punch. Yeah. And that goes a long, long way.
It's a fun matchup of styles, because I think that from all the things I'm reading, Madrimov is a very good athlete. He's also got a really good jab.
He's the champion of a weight class for a reason.
Yeah, but again, this fight to me boils down to experience. And Can Bud use all of those tricks of the trade and his ring experience to frustrate the younger fighter, get him off his game, force him into positions that he doesn't want to be in, which is one of my favorite things about Bud as a fighter is he takes the other fighter to places they do not want to be.
Yeah.
He forces them to fight out of their style.
If I'm in the Madrimov corner, if I'm Joel Diaz and that group of guys, I think I'm taking the Bud Crawford approach to it. I don't want to come out aggressive. I said it last year against Errol Spence. I thought it was the best idea for Crawford to come out and be the aggressor and set the tone because it'd been so long since since Spence had been in the ring. If I'm the Madrimov camp, I'm saying, hey, let's back up. Let's make him come to us. Let's let him feel the power.
Let's make the first 3 rounds boring.
Yeah, and he's got. Listen, Crawford's the contender, the number one contender here. He's not the championship, so judges usually often weigh on the side of the champion in that situation.
You got to beat the champ
because we don't need sparking on in this to be. We talked about the Shakur Stevens fight last night about how people were complaining it was boring. It led with Shakur Stevens being the winner of that fight.
Yeah.
And if Israel Madrimov could do that tomorrow night, that'll be the headline. Because right now, our friends at MGM Grand have Terrence Crawford as a minus 900 favorite to win this fight tonight. That means you'd have to put $900 on Bud Crawford to win 100. Now, he was minus 1,100 against Errol Spence, just for reference points. But he is a heavy, heavy betting favorite tomorrow, not only according to Vegas, but to anybody that's having the discussion. I heard obviously Bud had done some work with a couple of people in the boxing community a couple days ago, and we heard both Max Kellerman and Andre Ward who Bud was in the ring shadow boxing with, talk about, hey, we don't see a scenario in which Terrence Crawford loses this fight. And they've been pretty adamant about that for the last 40 in a row.
Yeah. But I want to explore this territory a little bit. For you, if it does end up being the first loss on Bud's record, what do you think has gone wrong? How did this fight go?
See, and I'll answer that question with a statement in a second, but I think that's kind of why it's okay to take this risk ahead of the Canelo Alvarez fight, because if it is the loss, hey, you've been able to be the class of the league in 3 consecutive weight classes before you got here, so a loss doesn't look that bad. But the only thing I can think of, and I mean this sincerely, I think the only way he loses is if the power is too much for him to handle. Now, Bud works out with a lot of bigger guys, bigger than Madrimov down at B&B Boxing, and anybody that's been around that gym knows they don't necessarily pull punches and sparring around there.
Yeah.
And he's a very hyper competitive person. You don't want to play him in cornhole, especially if you don't want to lose to him, because he'll let you know too. But he tells guys, hey, just because I'm the champ and my name's on the front door doesn't mean you got to pull punches when you're in here with me. And it's different than live rounds. And I don't care who you are, where you're at. It's different than live rounds in front of 80,000 people. But to me, a slip of a glove, a situation where he gets caught with his defense not up, and a big power shot is the only way I see this being different. Madrimov has to knock him out to win, in my opinion.
From everything that I've read so far, it sounds like Madrimov will probably come out in the first 3 rounds and do just stabs and jabs, right crosses to the body.
That's a typical championship fight.
Yeah, to try and get him lulled into a sense of, I'd say, faux security at that point in time. And then round number 4, he's going to come out and he's going to try to power punch just straight to the head with feints to down low, allegedly.
I will tell everybody that pays their hard-earned money to watch this fight tomorrow night, do not be discouraged if there's a maximum of 6 punches thrown in the first 2 rounds. Yeah. Get your popcorn ready by round 3, because I think both guys are going to take that approach, because to your point a minute ago, 11 fights is not a lot of film on a guy, especially a guy that's finished as many people as Madrimov has as well, too.
And I agree with you. I think if this is a classic boxing match, that is a bad scenario for Madrimov, because Bud is the better boxer.
For sure. How could he not be? We're talking about 40 fights compared to 11.
But he's got more power behind him, too.
Yeah.
Madrimov, from everything that I've read, is the less skilled puncher, and is the lighter puncher as well.
And to Madrimov's defense, you could probably say that about anybody else in the world.
I mean, and also, to be fair, he's still punching, and punching is always pretty hard.
You got a puncher's chance, man.
Yeah.
But I will say this about the champion. The videos and the footage that we have seen from him, and we will see him for the first time tonight, probably in his underwear, I
look forward to it.
He has looked incredible. Like he, if we're talking about championship level shape, he is going to be ready tomorrow. Now, will that matter in the long run? Like I said, I think he has to knock out Crawford to win. Obviously, that's his ability to throw those punches and be able to land them is going to matter more than anything. But if if he's hitting harder than he ever has before, I mean, it's obviously going to be in his best interest. And he's got to make weight tonight too. I know it is his weight division, but he's got to be able to make weight. But man, he looks cut from granite.
Yeah, Bud's going to land more punches. It's just a matter of which punches does Madrimov land. Like, when does he land them and where does he land them? I think that, defensive responsibility falls on the side of Bud, very obviously. This is going to come down to a matter of experience. To reiterate the point again, does Madrimov have the ability to overcome the ring savvy of Bud Crawford? I think that answer's no. And
I think that's the difference in the
yeah,
fight.
absolutely.
I said this last year, and it was because it was personal, and the entire Team Crawford group of guys felt like they had something to prove against Errol Spence. I said on air that I thought there would be a knockdown in the first 3 rounds for a guy in Errol Spence that had never been knocked down in his career, and I said that because I knew the bad intentions that were coming out of that camp. And I financially gained for it. Thank you very much to the MGM Grand, by the way, for that little payday.
Yes.
12-1, by the way. I was very excited when that happened. But I don't expect there to be a knockdown in the first 5 rounds. I really don't. I think there's going to be a ton of posturing at the beginning of this. I don't think either guy really feels the need to go out there and prove anything. And it's going to be a fight of styles. And honestly, I think it's in both guys' interest to come out and be a little defensive coming out of the gate.
Yeah, I'm really interested just in the amount of training that both of these guys have going into this, because obviously Madrimov is basically going into back-to-back camps between both of these fights.
And Bud's had a year off.
Yeah,
a year and 2 days to the date.
Yep, and Bud's, exactly to your point, Bud has had a year off, which I'm tired of reading online because they're like, well, he's had a year off and he's 36. And I'm like, you do know that Bud Crawford basically lives at the gym and still trains daily almost no matter what. It's just the intensity probably that varies a little bit.
Yeah, and obviously when you talk about a fighter from Uzbekistan versus a fighter from America, the styles are going to be different anyway. To me, that's what I'm looking for tomorrow more than anything from the entertainment aspect. Why does it look different? What looks different? What's the approach to it? It'll be interesting to see how the guys discuss it tonight in their camps openly at the weigh-ins, which again are just 16 minutes from now. But the other interesting part that we haven't even talked about this at all is the Eddie Hearn effect to it, because obviously he has worked closely with the folks with the Saudi contingency to make this fight happen. They are the people that are pushing for Canelo versus Crawford as well. But it just kind of feels like Eddie Hearn is this guy. He kind of feels like it feels like to make a pro wrestling reference, it feels like he's the guy that has like the heel factor. He feels like he's Bobby Heenan, and he's got all these guys that he's just lining up to get run through by Hulk Hogan. And because Eddie Hearn, this is the 4th fighter represented by Eddie Hearn that Terrence Crawford is going to fight in a matter of 5 years, and obviously Bud has run through everybody. Obviously, what's next is Canelo Alvarez on paper, and it looks like it, but it's just like. That's one of the questions I wanted to ask about Brian McIntyre is, what is the relationship between Eddie Hearn and the Crawford camp? Because it feels like there is a playful one there, but like respectfully playful. Like, hey, because Bud even asked him in New York, he said, well, who do you got next for me after this guy? Like, openly asked him that in front of everybody, because it's like, hey, we appreciate the paychecks. But again, there's probably, if you are debating buying the fight tomorrow, and we are obviously here promoting it, but I'm telling you this, you're probably going to want to do it because you're not going to get too many more of these out of Terrence Crawford.
And the card is really good, too.
Yeah, by the way,
you can watch Andy Ruiz.
This is probably the least interesting fight on the entire card.
There's another title fight. Isaac Cruz and Jose
There's 2
Venezuela.
other ones because you've got Big Baby fighting, too.
Oh,
and,
yeah.
Yeah, and then
it's
obviously Steve Nelson will be on the undercard. He'll be fighting at 4 Central Time, too, for anybody that's looking to watch the prelims, to watch the other fighter represented from Omaha. There were 4 in Vegas last year. Just so-called Steve Nelson and Terrence Crawford will be represented from Nebraska on this fight. But there are 4 prelim fights as well as the 5 on the main card. So you got a ton of boxing coming your way tomorrow. Just a reminder, we will be live at 2 o'clock Central Time doing our show leading up to the fights tomorrow night. We're going to give you our last call and our hottest take of the night when we come back to wrap up the fight here on 1620 Zone. Hey, everybody, it's Jimmy Allen here for Williams Law. You know our good friend Bob Williams. He stops by weekly to talk to you about all the legal problems facing the sporting world. He can help you with your legal problems as well. Maybe you're facing a DUI charge. They're expensive, they're unnecessary, but if you're facing one, you probably have a lot of questions that you don't have answers to. Let Bob Williams and his team answer those questions for you and be your legal representative by heading over to williamslawllc.com tonight and work with Bob and his team. He's going to give you a free no obligation legal consultation when you head over to Williams Law LLC. Make sure you tell them that After Hours sent you. We're shutting her down on a Friday night here on 1620 The Zone. Jimmy Allen, John Schreiner, Dan Campion live from LA. Our good friend Joey Colbert back at the studio has done a great job these last 2 days. Joe, we appreciate you. Thanks for being here tonight.
It's always a pleasure.
Ben Geezer was there at the beginning of the show. What was he doing in the studio? Is he still there?
No, he's not there. He left an hour ago. Just getting notes in for tomorrow's show.
Oh, that's right, because he's producer. You're not going to be here because you're a slacker. I forgot.
Yes, I'm a slacker.
It is time for last call where we give our hottest takes of the night. Dan Campion has microphone in hand and is ready. So I'm assuming you would like to go first.
His eyes are fixed.
Sure, I'll go first.
Go ahead.
Can we stop selling random pieces of memorabilia that feel inappropriate to sell? Kobe Bryant's locker that he used from 2003 to 2015, his retirement season, just sold at auction today with Sotheby's for $2.9 million. Number one, congratulations, you paid $2.9 million for basically a cubby from a preschool, but just bigger. And it's just stupid. I feel like we're kind of tainting a man's legacy by selling off anything that he has ever used or ever sat on.
You may not know the answer to this, but my only non-gripe about that would be, does the proceeds go to Vanessa Bryant? Because if that's the case, I'm fine with it.
No, they go to Sotheby's auction house.
Okay, yeah, then that's incredibly stupid.
Yeah.
And Vanessa Bryant probably should look at legal action, in my opinion. But go ahead.
Which she has done multiple times. This is exactly why Vanessa
She's won
Bryant...
every one of them, by the way. I just want to throw that out there, Celebes.
This is exactly why Vanessa Bryant said after Kobe died, she was like, we're still going to have the partnership with Nike, but we are not putting out shoes for quite a while to make this, not such an inappropriate thing where people are flooding the market with Kobe sneakers and just buying up as much as they possibly could at the time. I just don't like the fact that we taint a man's legacy. And it also feels appropriate because he just had another statue put up today in front of
which we're going to go
the
check
Staples
out at some
Center.
point. Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dan.
My last call tonight. Where do I always go on last call?
We're doing the same thing.
The footy?
Soccer.
I mean, I'm leaning into my gimmick as well. So good.
My season's on play right now. So
the U.S. men were eliminated in the quarterfinals of the Olympic tournament by a 4-0 score to Morocco. Yes, it's incredibly disappointing. But I'm not actually here to talk about the result. What I'm here to talk about is the fact that a kid from Omaha, Duncan McGuire, started for the U.S. men's national team, the under-23s who play in the Olympics. He started for Team USA. And I don't think we appreciate just how cool that actually is. I mean, this is a guy who was lightly recruited out of high school, got a chance at Creighton, caught on, had an unbelievable junior season in which he led the nation in goals scored and won the Mac Herman Trophy, soccer's equivalent of the Heisman.
Yeah.
He then went on to be drafted into the MLS, where it was kind of like, okay, he did that in college, but let's just tone it down. No,
sure.
He's had 2 incredible seasons in the MLS to the point where teams in Europe are vying for his signature to try and buy him from Orlando City. And now he's played with the U.S. men's national team jersey on his back. This is incredibly cool, and I think we should appreciate it a little more than we do.
We have his cell phone number. So maybe we should try to get him on the show, because I think we should talk to him about it. It's obviously, give it a couple days for him to get back to Paris, but let it wear off too. Apparently, we're wrapping up the show. I will give my last call. I'll just say it real quick. Gunther should win the WWE World Title tomorrow night at SummerSlam. That's it. If you missed any of the show tonight, check it out at SoundCloud.com.
Parting shots.
/AfterHours1620. Joey Colbert, if you ever wrap me up again, I will punch you in the face. Check out our show wherever you find your podcast at. It was brought to you by our friends at Pyramid Contractors, as well as Bellevue University, and courtesy of one Joey Colbert back in Omaha. Apparently has something to do tonight. Thanks for joining us. We will be live again tomorrow from 2 to 3 p.m. right here on 1620 The Zone. We'll see you tomorrow night.